Hey, what's up, everyone? The short version is that the update focuses heavily on polish, controls, and responsiveness improvements, a number of balancing tweaks around the living artifact and martial arts systems, and a laundry list of bug fixes that touch multiplayer, enemies, UI, and character creation. The kind of fixes that don't always make headlines, but really smooth out a play session. What I liked reading through was how they prioritized input responsiveness and some core interaction oddities, especially around sheath, draw behavior, and living artifact inputs for control type D players. If you've ever felt the game didn't quite register a quick weapon draw, or that living artifact activation behaved inconsistently, those are explicitly called out as being improved. And they also corrected the Amrita gauge behavior, so the living artifact activation edge cases should feel more reliable. That matters because when the game's fast-paced melee demands split-second decisions, having the input feel consistent changes not only success rates, but the enjoyment of tight fights. Alongside that, they reduced some of the elemental damage martial arts were doing while felt. Living Artifact is active, and introduced limits on consecutive uses of certain martial arts during Living Artifact. So you'll see Living Artifact play more as a strategic burst state rather than a blanket damage multiplier you can spam without trade-offs. Balance changes reach into weapon level adjustments too, and the patch notes call out a handful of specific martial arts and skills that were tweaked. For samurai-style weapons, there are buffs like increased power for Swallow's Wing and Victory Rush on the axe, while some dual sword and water-based martial arts got reined in. Rage and Season increased, but Water Sword 2 was reduced, so builds that relied heavily on that particular skill may want to reevaluate their rotation. On the ninja side, there are multiple changes. Tonfa launch speed was increased, but key damage was reduced. Hatchets got boosts to several skills like Chain Hurl and Dragonfly, while Dual Hawks now drains more enemy ki, but deals less damage, and Kusarigama and Split Staff skills saw adjustments to power and ki damage. Those changes are the kind that will slightly nudge weapon tiers and force a rethink for very specific setups, rather than completely upending everything. But for competitive or optimized builds, you'll want to test those moves and see whether you need to swap a martial art or reassign skill points. Beyond balance, the bug fixes are broad and quite practical. Multiplayer stability received a lot of attention, with fixes for crashes, loading issues, and players falling through sections of the map when ending sessions, plus specific corrections for things like Emerita Loss tied to Become a Visitor. The update also goes deep on combat oddities, numerous martial art inputs, stance transitions, chaining, aerial behavior, and specific skills, names like Frost Moon, EI Quick Draw, Tornado Edge, Roar, Celestial Retribution, and others were fixed to behave as expected. Enemy and boss fixes ranged from correcting blindness resistance, preventing bosses from leaving arenas or acting unpredictably, and fixing incorrect enemy counts or unintended grapple windows. There are also smaller but quality of life patches to UI and photo mode, plus fixes for character creation glitches where appearance or voice settings could be overwritten. All of that adds up to fewer "why did that just happen?" moments and more time actually playing the content as intended. I want to call out one subtle but important point. The living artifact adjustments aren't just raw nerfs or buffs. They appear to be aimed at preserving design space. By reducing some martial arts elemental damage while living artifact is active and capping consecutive uses of certain martial arts during it, the designers seem to be trying to maintain the distinct identity of both systems. Living artifact was intended to feel powerful and special, but not so dominant that it removes tactical decision-making from martial arts usage. That sort of balancing is delicate and usually plays out over multiple patches, as the devs watch player telemetry and community feedback. So expect to see more small adjustments rather than sweeping reversals. For people who play with keyboard and mouse, the patch addresses some annoying key binding quirks. K-pulse, stance changes, and movement issues tied to keys were fixed, which should make keyboard-based inputs less frustrating. There are also fixes to Nioh magic effects, for example, reducing the blindness duration from a specific soul core, and changes to item behaviors like the Soul Purge Talisman that tweak duration and damage. These are the kinds of adjustments that will be most visible if you rely on status effect strategies or specific talisman builds. Finally, there's a practical note in the release. The patch notes say the fixes are included in the retail build, and that any remaining issues are being queued for a subsequent minor update. That's the normal cadence for an active live service style of support, where a first wave of fixes hits, then follow-ups are scheduled as players surface edge cases. In short, this update isn't a huge rebalance that flips the meta on its head, but it's a meaningful polish step that improves inputs, clarifies how living artifact and martial arts interact, tightens weapon skill behavior, and eliminates a raft of bugs that could break or grind matches to a halt. That's the update in a conversational wrap-up: a control and responsiveness focus, important living artifact and martial art tuning, some weapon level shifts, and large swaths of stability and bug fixes. If you're the kind of player who values tight inputs and predictable system interactions, this one quietly makes the game feel better. If you're a min-maxer, there are a few small windows where your optimal rotations might shift. Thanks for hanging with me through all the details. I wanted to keep this friendly and useful, and that's where the patch sits right now.